Welcome back, everybody, to this special Thanksgiving edition of Just the News, No Noise. We are so thankful that you're spending a bit of your Thanksgiving evening with us tonight. Now, while we are all giving thanks this evening, it is important to remember charity, too. We all here in our country think that charitable giving is a good thing. In fact, our country is tops in the world at it. And the government gives out a lot, too, to help those in need, but here at home and around the world. But the problem is, the rate of government spending just isn't sustainable anymore. You've heard that throughout all of tonight's show. And one of the consequences of that is if the government fails, all of those benefits, poof, they go away for everyone, including the needy. So joining us now to talk more about what we can do, economist with the American Institute for Economic Research, Jason Sorens. Jason, thanks so much for being here.
Great to be here.
You know, whenever I hear conservatives complain about how much the government spends on welfare and social programs in general, I always have to throw it back at them and say, you know what? If the private sector, if churches, if charitable organizations were doing more, the government would not have to fill in. But unfortunately, we are in a place where so much of this welfare in our country is centralized with the federal government. But we saw this amazing thing when people were worried about their SNAP benefits being canceled on November 1st. It was churches filling their pantries and offering it to their neighbors. It was, private organizations collecting food, collecting cans. They were filling in the gaps. It seems to me that that's the way we solve this problem, not with the federal government.
That's right. And I think the evidence of the last few weeks when the SNAP payments were briefly suspended is that welfare programs actually do crowd out private charity. And so the more the government does, the less families and churches and charities do to address those needs. When we look at the history of welfare spending in this country, 100 years ago, the government spent about 45 times less as a percentage of the economy on welfare than it does today. And it was a much poorer country. So were people starving in the streets? There certainly was quite a bit of poverty, but you had institutions that would take care of people. You had strong churches, you had strong mutual aid societies. Most Americans belonged to some sort of fraternal society that would help you if you fell on hard times. So those things have disappeared because the welfare state took their place, and we've lost something as a result of that.
So, Jason, what happened first? Because it kind of sounds like a chicken and egg scenario. Was the situation that the government ballooned in its welfare provisions and therefore churches and charities drew back their efforts in creating these provisions for the communities around them? Or was it that these private institutions, churches, whatever, they shrunk back and then the government had to fill in? Which happened first?
Well, it's a complicated story. I think it's more the first. So we see that welfare programs expanded significantly during the Great Depression, and that makes sense. There was a lot of poverty then. There was a need for poverty relief, but those programs were permanent, and even when prosperity returned, they grew and grew, and in fact were expanded dramatically during the prosperous 1960s when the economy was growing fast. So those are the things that we spend a lot on today, and we've seen a decline really in private charities since then. So there really is a story here where government spending is crowding out charity. But also we need to acknowledge that it was sort of an unprecedented economic crisis that drove some of those government programs to begin with.
Yeah. All right. So SNAP is one of these programs that definitely needs to be reformed. We've got Secretary Rollins saying she's going to kick everybody off and then everyone reapply so that they can re-scrutinize all of those applications. And that's great. But there have got to be other social programs, big social programs, that could use that same treatment. What are some of the other problematic areas?
Yeah, well, so taking a big picture view of this, we don't need to abolish all these programs right away, and that would cause a lot of social instability and a lot of problems for people who've come to rely on these programs. But with some simple reforms, we can gradually shrink them and allow the private sector to take their place. So if we're talking about food stamps, about the SNAP program, the evidence is that there was about $50 billion in improper payments, according to the government's own data, over the last 20 years. So we need to do more there to ensure that we're not giving money to people who don't deserve it, who don't qualify for it. And one of the real problems there is that the states administer the program, but the federal government funds it. So states don't really have an incentive to weed out fraud. So that's a reform that we could make. If we look at the big entitlement programs, Social Security and Medicare, those are also headed toward a track to insolvency. Medicare very soon, and Social Security a few years later. There are some actually pretty simple reforms we could make to those programs that wouldn't abolish them or anything like that, certainly not overnight, but that would render them solvent. So, for instance, Social Security benefits are actually adjusted for wage growth, not inflation. So as the economy grows faster, Social Security benefits go up. That makes it really hard for us, impossible for us really to grow our way out of that Social Security liability. When we look at what we're facing here, the net federal liability for all of its debt and these entitlement programs amounts to $800,000 per household in America. So think about that. $800,000 of debt for your household that we're going to have to pay back. So we definitely need to make some reforms to these programs.
Yeah. Is there a weaning process that you feel like is going to need to be done, especially in the welfare situation with programs like SNAP?
I think so. And just a little bit of personal data here. I grew up poor. My family was poor, and I remember we didn't take cash welfare, and we did get some help from charities, but we did take food stamps at least for 1 year that I can recall. So, people do use these programs, but we can gradually reduce them. We are a much more prosperous country now than we used to be, and that's evidenced in frankly access to food. When we look at obesity data, for example, we see that 43.9% of adults living in households below 130% of the federal poverty line are obese. That compares to 40.3% of all Americans. So as your income goes down, you're more likely to be obese. So that tells us that most people that are at or below that federal poverty line actually are getting enough food, or getting plenty of food. So that food insecurity that we used to worry about so much, we can start to worry about that a little less. And as we're able to cut spending and cut taxes, that's more money that can go back into the private economy to boost wages and to give people money to donate to charity.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason Sorens, some really, really great ideas here. Economist with the American Institute for Economic Research. Jason, happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thank you so much. All right, everybody. John and I are going to be back to wrap things up on this Thanksgiving Thursday right after this last quick break.